and everything. But I do think this next topic will kind of line up with what we just talked about. But and hopefully that first one was beneficial in some way. So, good. There's a little water down there. And several years ago, I talked on this topic. So, some of you, it may sound a little similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty similar. You know, there's an epidemic that is in our society today. And it affects everyone to some degree. Now, I grew up in the 90s, and I know there's people in here that grew up before then, but I grew up in the 90s. And in the 90s, if I heard the word epidemic, first thing I thought they were talking about was AIDS, right? Because, I mean, it was concerts for AIDS. I mean, everything was about AIDS, right? And rightfully so. I mean, it was and it still is, a very terrible disease. But that was the epidemic of my time, so to speak. Most recently, the epidemic was COVID, right? COVID was everywhere. And COVID, in my opinion, affected our society a lot more and a lot different than AIDS did. You know, in the 90s, we talked about AIDS and saw commercials and stuff like that, but they didn't go around shutting down businesses, right? You could still go to the grocery store. You could still go here, there, what have you. You could do all those things. But when COVID came on the scene, I mean, the whole world shut down, right? The whole world shut down. And some people think that was the right approach. Some people don't. That's not the topic that I'm trying to get into. But that's a recent epidemic that we all experienced, or at least everyone in this room for sure. But I want to tell you about an epidemic. Like I said, there's one that's going on right now. And it's one that many of us are not even aware of. And it's called the busy epidemic. Busy. Okay? Now, over the years, you and I have come in contact with like believers, including ourselves, that this world is busy. Whether you're, you know, a person that's got young kids, and they'll say, oh, yeah, I know what you mean, it's busy. I mean, they're going left and right, pulling their hair out, so to speak, when you have kids. But even a person that's single and has no kids, they're busy, right? Everybody's busy. Young, old, rich, poor, right? Families, single, however you want to look at it, everybody's busy. Everybody's in a hurry. And if you look at work, everybody wants things faster, not slower, right? And, you know, nobody has patience. And these are all this epidemic that we live in that's called busy. And, you know, I wanted to start off by going to 1 Peter chapter 5. So let's go to 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5, and we're going to read verse 8. And in verse 8 it says, be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary the devil is prowling about as a roaring lion, seeking anyone that he may devour. Right? Short verse. The reason why I put that verse in there is because we need to know that we're not the only ones that are busy. Satan's busy. And what's he busy doing? He's busy trying to hunt us. He's busy trying to sabotage us. Nonstop, Satan is going back and forth with one mission in mind. And that is what? Our destruction. Our destruction. He's trying to devour us as a raging lion that we read here in Peter. Now think about that for a minute. Now, unfortunately, everyone in this room, including myself, there is somebody out there you don't like. Right? There's somebody you don't like. Even Philip has somebody he doesn't like. Right? There is somebody out there that you just don't maybe enjoy being around them. You avoid them. Maybe you don't like them. Whatever that person is. But here's the trade. You don't think about that person 24/7. No, you go on about your life, if you think about that person for 24/7, if they're always on your mind, you might need to talk to somebody, okay? You shouldn't have somebody bothering you that bad, right? But naturally, we have people maybe we don't enjoy being around or what have you. And like I said, we don't think about them nonstop. We don't think of ways of how can I get rid of this person? How can I destroy him, right? Well, no, because you would say, man, that person has a problem. Well, guess what? Satan has a problem. He has a problem. And he is that way. He thinks about ways in which to hurt all of us, not just the ones in this room, not just believers, everyone. Okay? He is absolutely determined to destroy mankind. Right? And you think about that. My father used to tell me this. He would say, now let that sink in. Right? Think about that. Understand that. He's your enemy. He's not someone that just gets, he thinks you get on his nerves a little, like we have people that we don't, like. No, he's your enemy. He's a devouring lion, right? And he's not wanting to just walk up so you can pet him. He wants to kill you, right? And so Satan isn't someone that, like I said, he's an enemy. And you have to let that sink in. A while back, I came across this list, and I'm going to read them off to you, but it says 12 things that Satan does to, attack Christians. Some of them might stand out for you. The first one was, it says he keeps them busy with non-essential things, right? Because, I had a lady in my office last week, and she was like, oh, I've got so much to do. I was like, what do you have to do? And she started naming off a few of them. And it was like, none of it, from my experience, none of it was important. I mean, it wasn't something like, it wasn't really high up on the list. It might have been important to her, right? But Satan keeps us busy with things that are not really essential, right? Okay? And that's the first one. The second one is he tempts us to overspend and go into debt, right? How does he tempt us? Well, there's a lot of different ways to get tempted to buy things, whether it's ads that pop up in your phone, whether it's stuff that pops up on your TV, whether it's people you see out in public and you're like, oh, I like that. I want to get that, or who knows? But we're tempted to constantly go into debt, right? The next thing is, third one, makes them work long hours, right? Makes them work long hours, where you have people that actually, the only time they ever leave their house is to go to work. And that is not just, that is not a playing on words, because there's people that literally only leave to go to work. And what I mean by that, one of the girls that works for me, her groceries are delivered to her house. She doesn't even leave to go to the grocery store. She only leaves when she comes to work, right? And that's when she gets gas. So the rest of the time she's at her house, I'll ask her on Monday, I'll be like, what'd you do this weekend? I would just sat at the house. And that's all they do. And so, what happens there? You work so much, you're drained. And so when the afternoon comes, I just want to go home, right? Confined, right? Is that not a form of imprisonment, I guess you could look at? Discourages them from spending time with their families. That's a fourth thing, right? Satan does not like for families to get together, right? And how might he accomplish that? Well, he might put divisions within families where they fight all the time and things like that, where they don't enjoy being together. We know that the family is part of God, right? And so the fifth one is overstimulates our minds with televisions, computers, movies, phones, all these different things. There's all these different distractions. You go into most people's houses, if they have a table set out or what have you, there might be magazines, books, whatever. When's the last time you saw a Bible sitting there? Right? And mailboxes. what's all the junk mail you get in the mail? You know, I will have a stack of mail and I'm like, man, I wonder what all this is. And like 90% of it is junk. Not even bills, just junk. And I throw them away. I don't even open them. But there's people out there that open every piece of mail that they get. Okay, every piece. And that's a waste of time, you know. Then another thing you might look at is they put glamour models, right? That's something, you know, whether guy or girl, put all these very attractive people, you know, and you're like, oh, I need to look like that. So there's all this vanity pull, right? And then, you know, a lot of people talk about social media. They say that that's the reason why people split up and what have you. You know, they're looking at this person or that person or what have you. So all of these are temptations that we see that originate from Satan. Now, on this list, it also talked about this. Now, I know we don't fall in this category, but it says, you know, when you think about Christmas and Easter, it's public. You know, it's public now. It's like Santa Claus and Easter bunnies. People say, oh, you don't even know what the reason for the season is. Now, we might not can relate with that, but we can with the holy days, right? Right? We've seen the far version of that where, you know, we're driving to come observe. Everybody else is going on about their business, right? Especially if we have services during the middle of the week, right? When we met here a couple of weeks ago, parking lot was packed. And it wasn't because we had a full house in here. We did. But it was because people were going about their business. And so you think about those things. And then the 11th one says, people have a tendency to get involved in good causes. And you say, well, hold on a second. How's that a distraction? To get involved in good causes. Well, you know, people say, well, I'm going to go out and do a good thing. I'm going to go volunteer at the pet thing or the dog thing, or I'm going to go do this or going to do that. And all of those things are wonderful things to do, right? But they leave undone their first love, which should be God, right? And so we got to put things in that perspective. And then the last one, it says, make themselves self-satisfied, keeps them busy working in their own strengths. You see a lot of people, you know, I've get this wealth, right? And I'm gonna learn to do this. I'm gonna learn to do that. And we get that attitude of mighty hand, right? And I can do this and I can do that, right? These are just some different points for us to think about of attitudes and things that you may or may not see in society that all lend to what? Keeping people busy. Keeping people busy. And busy not doing things that please God. Busy being a deterrence. Busy keeping people away from God. Let's go to Revelations chapter 12. Revelations chapter 12 and verse 12. And in Revelations chapter 12 and verse 12, it says, therefore rejoice, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. Woe to those who inhabit the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows he has a short time. He knows he has a short time. Now, this verse was written thousands of years ago. Our definition of a short time is a lot different than God's. Christ didn't return while my parents were still alive. Right? My parents are both gone now. And he may not return in my lifetime. He might, but he may not. But I do have faith that he will return. And in the whole scheme of time, whenever that takes place, Satan does have a short period of time. He has an allotted amount of time to do his havoc. And that's what he's busy doing. And he's really good at it. Not to brag, because it's not something he should be good at, but that's what he does. He's a lion trying to devour us, trying to sabotage us, trying to keep us away from God, trying to teach us that the ways in which we learned about earlier, how we love God, teaching us that, oh, no, don't do those. That's all done away with. We must remember that Satan's subtle in his ways. And this causes us to compromise. This is one of the biggest things that we have to be aware of. Compromise, 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 right? And in some cases, compromise is good. But in a lot of cases, it's not. So if you wanted to put an acronym behind the word busy, not saying this is really what the word means, but busy, bound under Satan's yoke. Bound under Satan's yoke. Let's think about that. Let it sink in. You know, Christ, in the previous message that I just gave, we talked about how his yoke isn't bondage. And it's light. But Satan's is the exact opposite of that, right? It is bondage. But guess what? Here's what's interesting. Even though Satan's yoke is bondage, how does he reel most people in? The selling of freedom. Oh, you don't have to do that anymore, right? I didn't hit him right. So I didn't hit it when I did that, but it was funny how I did that. Would you got something over your hitting?
Nope.
Maybe it's just the wind. Huh.
Yeah, if I turned,
Yeah, how about that?
Distraction.
Okay.
if I turned it too loud, you can hear the.
I got you.
ceiling.
So I was like, I didn't hit that. So anyway, but think about that. One of the main ways that Satan lures people in is with freedom. Oh, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to keep the Sabbath. You don't have to keep the holy days, even though they're enjoyable, right? I don't have to work today. And if my employer had called me and said, "Hey, I need you to come in today," I'd say, "Unfortunately, I can't. I observe the Sabbath." I mean, it's like the get out of jail free card, right? I mean, think about that. Now, so that's one of the ways that Satan lures people in is by, even though his yoke is bondage, he lures people in with freedom. And if we're too busy for God, too busy to learn about what God and his ways are, too busy to fellowship with like believers, too busy for family, you just keep going down the list, too busy replacing God's causes with what? Good causes. I'm going to go give some money to charity. Not saying you shouldn't do that, right? But don't leave the other undone. Then you're under a yoke of bondage. If all of those things are not important to you. The same yoke, and I want us to remember this because we just talked a lot about it coming out of Passover, the days of unleavened bread. The same yoke that ancient Israel was under in Egypt, which was slavery, like real slavery. And yet at times, even after they had seen all the miracles and they'd been delivered, they looked at Moses and said, "What? Why did you deliver us? Didn't we tell you we wanted to remain slaves?" Think about that. Why did you deliver us? We would rather be in a yoke of bondage. That is how much influence Satan can have on a person's mind, my mind, your mind, and we need to be aware of it. We need to be conscious of it because we need to be able to protect ourselves and stay on guard from these types of attacks, right? And remember that, right? Let's go to Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11 and verse 28. And beginning in verse 28, it says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are overly burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest in your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Christ's yoke is light. And there's 3 points to pull out of these. In verse 28, in order for us to want to be in this type of setting, to come out, we got to be not satisfied with the current system. We have to realize that this world out here is not the world of God, that there is a better world coming. This is Satan's world, and he has a short period of time, right? Now, we live in relative peace here in our country, but as time goes on, things have gotten worse. and they'll continue to get worse as things go on. The point two, what does it say? Who labor in vain are overly burdened. We need to have that mindset of we need relief. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I want relief. And in verse 29, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. We need to have an attitude of, I don't want this world. I don't want to be a part of it. I need relief. God, show me your ways. Teach me. Christ's yoke isn't busy. It's the opposite of busy. What does he say? Rest. Rest. Right? Let's go to Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. I worked in the yard yesterday trying to fix a pool pump. And, I never got it. I didn't get it fixed. But in the process of doing so, I have got a farmer's tan, and my neck is right now, it is on fire, man. I can just feel the heat coming off of it. And but I was out there all day trying to get it. I got it somewhat fixed, but couldn't get it primed. But anyway, I just feel the heat coming off my face, man. But Genesis chapter 2 and verse 1, and it says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And by the beginning of the seventh day, God finished his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because on it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. Now, the Sabbath, many say, is the first gift God ever gave us, right? And he blessed this day. And when people, you can use this verse for so many different points to bring out. One of them is when people say, oh, you keep the Jewish Sabbath. You go to Genesis where the Sabbath was created that we just read. What religion existed at that time? Right? We do not keep the Jewish Sabbath. We observe God's Sabbath. Right? God wants us to sit back on this day and appreciate his creation. He wants us to learn about his plans for us. I don't know who that is next door drilling or whichever side it is, but whoever they are, do you not think they would rather be home with their family? Do you not think they would rather be able to have, not worried about having to get up and go to work today? Now, I don't know the person. Maybe they need the money. Right? Maybe all those type things. But we're told to rest this day. Let God handle your worries and your problems. And so he wants us to learn about his plans for us. This is a great day for us to do what? Very famous topic today. This is a great day to grow your relationship with God. And it's the day he intended us to grow that relationship. He wants to see and understand. He wants us to see and understand how his laws are gentle and for our own good. And more importantly, that they're all about love, not punishment. They're all about love. They're woven together. And so it's not that God's laws are something we should just be memorizing and using as enforcers. Right? As the Pharisees did. Oh, you shouldn't have picked that corn. Right? But the spirit of the law. And this is done when we take God's laws and we try to learn from them and understand them and apply them. Why is the Sabbath important? Why are the holy days important? Right? Why are all these various things important? When we do this, God is actually allowing you and I to see through a window, maybe very small, very hazy, but we're able to see a little bit into the mind of God and how he thinks. Once we do this, we come to know something greater than the law, and that's the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law. And so, a young or a weak-minded person would say, your car's broke down. Oh, you can't fix that flat. It's the Sabbath. Right? But what did Christ say? No. You have an ox in the ditch. You have an emergency situation. And that's knowing the spirit of the law. And that's what we're trying to be perfected to. The spirit of law is what allowed Christ to heal people on the Sabbath day. It's what allowed Christ and his disciples to pick corn on the Sabbath. It's what allowed David to eat the showbread. You can go down the list, right? And so when you know the spirit of the law, you're beginning to put on what? The yoke of Christ. You're beginning to understand that this is not a burden. It's understanding. It's light, right? The burden is out there. The burden is next door working. That's the burden. Let's go to 1 John chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5, and we're just going to read one scripture here. But in 1 John chapter 5 and verse 3, it says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." You have to ignore a lot of verses to believe that the law of God's been done away with. Right? You really do. This is the love of God for us to keep his commandments. Right? Today we live in Satan's world, a world that teaches God's laws are done away with because they're too hard, too grievous. However, if you sit down, what's so hard about stealing? Like, you shouldn't steal, right? In fact, I had a client that called me this week. I just thought about this. I had a client that called me this week. He said, "Ben, I think I might need to file a claim." And I said, "Really, what happened?" He said, "Well, I had some stuff stolen out of the back of my truck." I said, "Oh, no." And he said, "What's my deductible?" I said, "Well, you'd actually have to file that on your home." I told him it's deductible. He said, "No, it wasn't that much stuff, so I guess I don't need to file a claim." And he said, "I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid." He said, "I don't know why I just left that chainsaw and those tools in the back of my truck, and when I went to work and when I got off work, they were gone." And then he caught himself. And he said, "You know what? I'm really not stupid. Somebody shouldn't be stealing." And I said, "You're absolutely right." I said, you're not stupid. I mean, he could have been a little smarter, right? Maybe putting his stuff up, but that's the world we live in. Whoever stole that stuff doesn't love their fellow man, right? And so we can learn from these laws if we break them down. If we what? If we're not too busy. If we're too busy, we lose clarity. But if we slow down and look at them, who benefits when I do this or don't do this? And we can learn a lot about them. Murder, pretty self-explanatory, right? Yeah, I mean, a person's murdered, they're no longer here, their family's grieving. Now, if you got it on your conscience, you're probably going to go to jail for the rest of your life. Now your family's crying. It's just lose altogether. You say, well, God can resurrect them. Absolutely, God can resurrect them. It's still a terrible situation. In the past, even today, the religious leaders have made the law of God a yoke of bondage or a stumbling block, right? And Satan is behind that. Satan's behind it. And yet, the more we learn when the law of God is removed, we miss the big point. We're being told, now I want you to think about this. We're being told, hey, you can't love God that way anymore. You can't love God that way anymore. You can't keep the Sabbath. You can't do this. You can't do that. Removing ways in which you and I have been given opportunities to show our love for God. Matthew chapter 12. Let's go to Matthew chapter 12. And so when you remove the law, you remove our ability to show God that we love him. Matthew chapter 12, and we'll begin in verse 1. And it says, "At that time Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath day, and his disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain to eat them. But after seeing this, the Pharisees told him, 'Behold, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath.' But he said to them, 'Have you not read where David, when he himself and those who were hungry, and he went into the house of God and ate the loaves of the showbread, which is not lawful for him to do, nor for those who are with him, but for the priest only? Or have you not read in the law that the Sabbath, the priest, and the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? But I say to you, there is one here who is greater than the temple. And now if you have known what that means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath day. The Sabbath is the Lord's day, not tomorrow. This day is the Lord's day. Christ himself said it. You know, we have to be willing to learn. We have to be wanting to leave this world, come out of Egypt. We have to be wanting to seek God's way, which is his commandments, which is how we show we love him. And, you know, the people that were attacking Christ here were supposed to be knowledgeable of the law, and they were. But they were knowledgeable of the letter of the law. And in their eyes, that meant the teeth. And what I mean by that is how you could attack people, how you could say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Very judgmental, right? And that's not what God's law is designed to do, right? So they knew the law as a restraint, and they used it for their power. And as a result, they were misjudging. You know, a stop sign means stop, right? Say, yeah, a stop sign means stop. But does a stop sign mean stop for an ambulance? Does a stop sign mean stop if you're in the car and your spouse looks at you and says, I think I'm having a heart attack, get me to the doctor or to the hospital? No. Stop sign no longer means stop them. And so that's what these individuals didn't understand. And we have to learn to practice the weightier matters of the law, right? The weightier matters of the law. Let's go to the book of Proverbs. Mm-hmm. Well, I said Proverbs, not Proverbs, sorry. Micah. We're going to Micah chapter 6. Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. Sorry about that. Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with God. That's Christ's yoke, right? That's Christ's yoke, you know. And we can't get into nominal Christianity mindset of that's all done away with. We can't, because it hasn't been. It's how we love God. And when you dismiss those items, you're actually throwing out Christ's yoke. You know, we have to walk humbly with God. That means we are constantly making changes, fixing what needs to be fixed, tearing down what needs to be torn down, right? And I'm talking about spiritual things within our lives. That's why we're told to examine ourselves. We have to walk humbly because we know we're sinners. We're not perfect, right? Even after you've been keeping the Sabbath and the holy days, if you kept them your whole life, nothing for you to boast about. Nothing for you to boast about, because we would all agree there's more that we don't know than we know. Right? We can't walk humbly with God if we don't know him. And we have to know him. In order to know him, we have to keep his commandments, because that's how we learn more about him and what his stance are, right? Go back to Genesis, not turning there, but God was in the garden with Adam and Eve, and he was communicating with them. He was building that relationship, and they made a bad decision, not him, right? Satan didn't like that setup of us having constant communication with God. And so what did he do? He sabotaged it. But thankfully, with Christ coming and giving his life, we have, things have been restored. Not completely yet, because we're still in Satan's world, but it gave the opportunity for us to be forgiven for our sins and things to be put back in order to be continued later when he returns. Let's go to John chapter 16. John chapter 16. And verse 33. John chapter 16 and verse 33. These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you shall have tribulation, but be courageous. I have overcome the world. What makes the burden light is that Christ has already overcome the world. That's the beautiful thing about it, because you and I have already messed up. We've already slipped, but he didn't. But that doesn't mean we just throw our hands up and say, oh, we don't have to do that anymore. No. It just means we can keep getting up. It means we can keep striving towards perfection. Over 2,000 years ago, Christ walked on this earth. He was tempted in every area by Satan. He overcame those temptations. That's where our hope is. We aren't the only ones that have to experience this life in Satan's world. Christ did too. He had to experience it. He came and walked in the flesh so that why? So that he can relate. He's been there, done that, right? And we go to him in prayer. He understands. He's actually been on this earth as a human being and walked in the flesh. It was a different time, but he did it. It was a different time, but he did it. So, let me see. Over the last few months, we've observed several of God's holy days. And now we're at this time where we're counting Sabbaths. We're counting towards Pentecost. So let's don't get busy and lose the ground that we've made up these last few months in our relationship building with God, right? Come through Passover, the days of unleavened bread, the wave sheaf, all the meals that we got to share and the times. It's our time to overcome. It's our race to run, right? And remember, Christ overcame. He's always there for us. He's just a prayer away, right? And we can't forget that we seek a city that's not here yet. And so, over the next few weeks as we're counting towards Pentecost, let's don't begin to miss Egypt as the Israelites did. Let's don't begin to say, oh, man, wish I would have just been left alone, right, as they did. And I know we won't. I know we won't go to that extreme. But look for the little subtle things and overcome those.